And they're kind of, that's why Putin is kind of so respected, because in a way he's the old system and the new guys, you know. And you know, there's this kind of hilarious story that Boris Kagalitsky likes to talk about that. He says, well, you know, we were also besotted with what was going on in 1989 and everything, and we all thought we were getting on this plane and we were going to fly to Paris, and he said, we all got on this plane and we were all flying off, and the pilot says, well, welcome aboard this plane, we're headed to Burkina Faso. And everybody says, what? And the pilot says, well, sorry, that's where we're going. But nobody could get off, you know. And so, I mean, you look at the catastrophic effects of, which Jeffrey Sachs, by the way, had a lot to do with in the 1990s. He claims that the reason that things went sour in Russia was they didn't actually quite follow these prescriptions. All economists do that, you know, when things did that, they didn't do it quite the way I said they should do it. So if you look at the catastrophic collapse in life expectancy and incomes, of infant mortality in the Soviet Union after 1989, right the way through to pretty much the end of the 1990s, you've got a good idea of what some of this means. Meanwhile, you know, in India, for example, I mean, I'm not that familiar with it. I've been there a couple of times, you know, and had some very good colleagues, and I was talking to some of the people who were involved in the Nandigram, you know, who were caught up in the Nandigram massacre and things like that, and you find a situation in which state power is being used to dispossess perfectly viable agrarian economics. I mean, I went to a designated SEZ south of Mumbai. It's going to be taken over and run by Reliance. But the interesting thing about this, they're supposedly industrial zones. But when somebody went to the fine print, it turns about 80% of it is going to be urbanization. It's a land grab. It's nothing to do with industrialization. And when they kind of say to the peasant population, hey, you're going to get employed here, most of the jobs that are going in there are going to be high tech. There's not going to be any real employment, and most of it will be in construction, because they're going to build, I think in this one in the south of Mumbai, they're going to build a new town, in effect. And it's a land grab. It's a property development scheme. It's not an industrialization thing at all. Which brings me back to the question of the way in which urbanization is becoming the means by which a lot of the surplus is being absorbed right now in these vast development projects, which do not make sense from the standpoint of the mass of the population.
I just want to say that the fact that you're so big, probably, and the kind of rise of the middle class, it has probably something to do with the fact that, yes, you do have a lot of the underprivileged, but a lot of people constantly argue that the overall proportion of the underprivileged has severely decreased, and that's constantly cited as one of the kind of good things that neoliberalism has done. I don't necessarily agree with that.
I'd be very interested to see the data. I mean, Alejandro Portes and Roberts did a detailed study of what happened in 5, 6 Latin American cities through neoliberalization, and they did really, really detailed studies. They found in every city except one, which is Santiago, the absolute numbers in poverty increased. In all cities, including Santiago, the relative income distribution went way further than it already was, which was already pretty dramatic. This is the other thing that's generally forgotten. Almost invariably, neoliberalization gets followed by a crime wave. And I like to think about this, well, it's really the privatization of redistribution. And actually, people take it into their own hands. And you know, having been held at gunpoint on a floor in Argentina for 2 hours, I know what it's about. You know, it's not a joke. You know, I mean, it is a privatization of redistribution, and you kind of go, well, this is, you know, and an alternative economy arises, of course, through drugs and the 3 biggest growth industries in the world right now are illicit trade in arms, drugs, and trafficking in women. And those are the three big industries right now. So you're getting an illegal economy. The mafia has been resurgence of the mafia in Italy. So Sicily has gone from being kind of a local thing to being a transfer point for a lot of these kinds of movements, you're finding the emergence of mafias right throughout Eastern Europe, you know, so you're getting a tremendous kind of economy, of this alternative economy that's emerging, which of course is one of the ways in which poor people can be employed. And if you have no access to legitimate employment and there's no possibility of that kind, what are you going to do? You're going to go into the redistributive chain, which is coming out of criminality of various kinds. So this too is one of the impacts of neoliberalization. And you go anywhere in the world and you see neoliberalization. You know, in Mexico City, when I first knew it, you're likely to find your pocket picked, but you are not going to find yourself, you know, killed or abducted or something like that, you know. But it's extremely dangerous in many of these cities now. And the same is true in Brazil. So the result of that is, of course, how does the bourgeoisie defend itself? It goes more and more into gated communities, and it goes more into a segmented kind of world where it lives in a bubble. I mean, in Sao Paulo, it's amazing. We were going out from somebody's house to a restaurant that was just down the block, and they drove the car. Why do you drive the car? I said, we walk down the block. You must be crazy. So you drive out of a subterranean garage, going out through, you know, the gated pillars come down, and you go out, and you go down, and you go down, and you get to the restaurant, there's a load of people around, you get out of the car, and the valet takes the car off. I mean, what kind of lifestyle is this? Is this the kind of urbanization you want your kids to inherit? This is ludicrous, you know. And I think that kind of construct, which is emerging now more strongly, and you begin to see some of it in the US cities too. A number of gated communities around, growing by, you know, just crazy. So this is not, and part of the result of that, by the way, is that the notion that we can have a city politics, which is going to be about the city, and urbanization in general starts to disappear from people's consciousness. And this is what I think Park is talking about. Our mental conceptions of the world get constructed around these bubbles in which we can actually live, and therefore our notion and the scale of the thing, we can't get our minds around the scale of the thing, so that politics gets completely screwed up. And then comes back down to the politics of neighborhood again, and people kind of trot out Jane Jacobs and say, well, that's all we can do, so let's do that. You know? So it's a difficult political moment, but you've got to see how the world is being constructed this way, and how the urban experience is being constructed in this way, which has very, very clear impacts on who we are and what we think and what is possible. I am not in favor of the privatization of redistribution. I don't want to live in a world where, you know, people start pointing guns at you and take things away from you and threaten to kidnap your daughter and all that kind of. I don't want to live in that world. So yeah, I come down there on the forces, you know, side of the forces of law and order, but then I don't want to be there because they violate civil rights. They go and zap it to all the wrong people. They don't go down to Wall Street and kick the shit out of the people down in Wall Street. No, what do? And Wall Street's on cocaine most of the time. It should be obvious. I mean, it's a very. I mean, you know, this is the dilemmas that we all face. And in terms of your own personal life, you find yourself, yeah, I don't want to expose people around me to these kinds of dangers. I can't do that, you know. So you start to take actions which you don't want to take, and then you kind of go, well, when I've taken those actions I don't want to take, then where do we go from here with the politics? And it comes down to that everyday life kind of level, where everyday life in most metropolitan areas, in Baltimore, for example, has become untenable for a lot of the population. A lot of the population is in a permanent state of trauma. Now,